Testing, 1, 2, 3. This is the last time we will be touching this microphone today. Okay, well, welcome, Dr. Ramaley. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's such an honor to be inviting you and welcoming you here, Dr. Ramaley. Just a little information, if some of you know him, but for those of you who don't, he's spent the last 24 years helping people achieve incredible health and vitality. As a naturopath and a chiropractor, he incorporates natural approaches with the latest scientific research. He attended Bastyr University and Life Chiropractic College West and received a diploma in chiropractic neurology. There might be a question on that one. He co-founded Seattle Natural Health, a clinic that focuses on acute and chronic health issues and solutions to those problems. Dr. Ramaley is a writer, lecturer, educator on health and nutrition. He's an innovative thinker, is compassionate and passionate about health and human performance, and thrives on helping people resolve health challenges. So let's give him a big welcome from a little group, right. And thank you for online.
Thank you. Boy, where do we even start, huh? So I was just saying this is kind of like the Bernie Sanders and Biden debate tonight because there's nobody, well, you guys are out here, so that's great. So that's probably better than CNN is going to get or whatever. But so originally this talk was going to be on the microbiome and mitochondria, but it kind of got switched around just because of everything that's happening right now in our country and the world. So I thought we could focus on that, and we may even do a turnaround and come back to the microbiome and mitochondria, because that's really what it is sort of all about. But I thought I would just address some things about the coronavirus, just the things that we're seeing in our office, and just try to give some helpful hints about what's happening with the virus and things that we can do to stay healthy. And if I have to, I might stand around. If I need to start moving around, I won't sit very long, so we'll just see how that goes. So the first thing I would just say, and the people who we've been seeing coming in, is not to fear it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cautious. I know we're all taking kind of due diligence and keeping our space and all that's great. But we have to keep this a little bit in kind of context of everything else that is going on. I do not claim to have all the information that everybody has working in hospitals or the World Health Organization, so I take everything I would say with a grain of salt, but only what I've been reading about quite a bit and kind of looking at some alternative sources as well, is that the latest figure is somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 deaths so far in the world, and that could dramatically change. So I'm only kind of going with the information that we have right now, but kind of with the fear level, as we got to put a little bit of context. I did a YouTube video, podcast just last week talking about this, and we got to realize that 80,000 people die every year in this country from something called the norovirus, and I don't know if anybody's even really aware of that, but that's like 80,000 people. We have over at least 70,000 hospitalizations, and 21 million people get this virus. My mom, who has since passed, lived in a kind of an assisted living retirement home, and the norovirus would come through there and would kill 4 or 5 of them in the home, every winter, if not even more. And yet that isn't making the front page of the news. So if we heard about the norovirus, everybody'd be freaking out, because that's just 80,000 just in the United States. But we don't really see that on the front page news. We also don't read much about something called sepsis. And I'm only just, again, mentioning this, I want to put this in a context. Sepsis is spelled S-E-P-S-I-S, is an infection of the blood, and it's actually the #1 killer in the world, but it's not making the front page news either. And that's an infection of the blood, and it has about a 30% mortality rate. In the last month, we've had 2 patients who have come in who actually had sepsis. They both survived, but it was a traumatic event in the hospital. So again, if we're kind of looking at overall kind of like mortality and the cost of our healthcare system, that's a huge thing. And then if you just look at the flu, I looked at this 2 days ago, so it may have changed, but they know at least 80 people have died so far in Washington State just of the influenza, and 8 of those have been children. So if we'd flipped that around and said it was COVID-19 and 8 children had died from COVID-19, it would be on the front page of the news. So again, this isn't to say that we shouldn't be taking the things that we're doing to be cautious about COVID-19 and what's happening, but again, it's sort of that fear level. And probably some of that is because those are things that we just don't know everything about this virus yet. but put in the bigger context of all the health risks that we could actually die from or get sick from, so far it hasn't shown to be that great. And again, that's 3,000 people who have died. And as you probably aware, I mean, many of you have made different opinions about this, so again, I don't claim to have all of the insight, but most of those people have been older. It's spared children. There's a number of reasons for that, I believe. In Italy, we're hearing about the high mortality rate, but the vast majority, the last thing I read, was 92% were over 80 years old. And the reason why I think it's hitting Italy is because they have the highest age range, the most elderly people in all of Europe than anywhere else. So again, it's kind of putting this context, and I do not have an answer of why all of this is happening. Maybe it's happening on some universal energetic level, maybe it's something that's gone, there's probably 100 different theories on that, so I don't really have a theory on why this is going on. I'm sure everybody else might have a different idea, but it's kind of an odd phenomena. And the other thing is that I think it's good that we're being cautious, but there's also the flip side of this is that all these drastic measures that we're taking, and again, I'm not trying to criticize it, but to put a little bit in perspective, is that it's just not that we think of the huge economic consequences coming out of this, which will be, trillions of dollars globally, whether it's the stock market or not. It's just what's going to happen to people personally. So I went to the dry cleaners on Saturday. He laid off one of his workers. It's a single mom from El Salvador who has 2 kids. So she is without a job now. And then, so we're going to see this cascade. One of the coffee shops near our office is going to probably close, and they employ 3 people. So there's also the consequence of people not working, of people living in fear, and what that's doing to children. We could go on and on. So it's not to be a criticism of it, but it's just kind of like we got to keep this in a little bit of context that there's going to be a lot of other health ramifications from kind of all these things that we're doing. And maybe this would be, one of you might have an answer, and I don't really know why the world is reacting this way to something that so far has appeared to be very mild. And again, I don't want to go on and on, but in China, we think of like Wuhan as the city where all that began, but it spread throughout all of China, and almost all those other cities did not sequester people in those towns. They basically went, and this is coming from the government itself, but they basically went around and told people to do what they do with any flu. If you're sick, stay home, wash your hands. If you have some kind of a health condition, don't go out. It was kind of like the typical things you would do, and they actually contained it in those cities. So I'm not quite sure where all this response is coming from, and if someone has a great idea on it, I'm open to hearing anything. But it just seems to me like a little bit of I don't want to call it an overreaction, but maybe it's not a well thought out idea. Again, we definitely want to be doing everything we can, to be stopping it, but I just don't know if we need to be doing this right now. But that's just my opinion, and it could change as things move on. But the purpose of this talk was to actually talk about how to be healthy. So it doesn't matter whether it's COVID-19 or SARS or MERS or any other infection, influenza A or influenza B. There's all these other things out there. So really, it's like how do we stay healthy? So the first thing is I would not look at this as COVID-19, but any flu will come in and affect our health. So originally we're going to talk about the microbiome, about the gut bacteria. And I would actually start right with that. That would be one of the first things, is keeping a healthy gut. The more healthy bacteria we have in there, the better we're going to be able to resist any kind of disease that comes into our space. And so there's all sorts of probiotics and things like that, but I wanted to talk a little bit more kind of like about diet and things that we can do for that. And one of my favorite things that I love is, if we can get people to do that, is to eat fermented vegetables. And I'm sure if you've read any of the kind of the information out there, but it's incredible. So, you can buy this in stores now. You can buy like fermented sauerkraut, pickles, all these kinds of things that are raw. They're on the shelf, so you don't want to buy something that's in a jar that's just sitting on a regular shelf. But those foods take all the things from your environment, and they are information to your gut. Those things go in there, and they tell your bacteria basically how to produce their own bacteria to keep you healthy. And I believe they're even better than probiotics. So if we were to add this into our diet on a daily basis, just 1 or 2 tablespoons, I think it'll have a profound effect, and I think the research is definitely showing that too, on our own health. And one of the first things I would say to help with the flu, and any of you who have been into our office, I'm kind of adamant about this, is that the number 1 prescription I write is go outside. That is the very first thing. That's what my mother used to teach us when we were sick. You know, she always said, go outside, and she'd kick all of us outside, right? So you want to be outside in the sun. Now, we could think that's kind of a, little cute thing that I'll just go outside, but I want to explain a little bit about the science behind that and how that actually fits into our microbiome and how that even addresses the flu. So the way it affects our microbiome is that our body actually communicates by light. Now, we know that the nervous system, we think one nerve going to another, it has a synapse that goes to another. There's absolutely no way they've proven that over and over. Like, let's just say you're taking someone who's hitting a baseball. There's absolutely no way you can have that much of a nerve conduction going through the body to actually be able to hit a ball or for the things to dance, to do all these things. So basically, our cells are using light to communicate from one cell to the other. And the way that in the microbiome, it's so interesting that bacteria, so if you take this cell of like your skin or a muscle or anything, they can actually measure how much light comes off that cell. If you take the cell of a gut bacteria, it is 5,000 times more, emits 5,000 times more light than a human cell. So what that bacteria is doing is emitting this huge amount of light throughout our body, and it's telling our body basically how to function. So we think about the healthy gut bacteria that, yeah, we need this to kind of keep the bad bacteria in balance, but really that bacteria is communicating to our whole body just simultaneously about what's happening. And so one of the best ways to turn on our gut bacteria is to actually go outside and get light. And that fits back into our nervous system. So in our eyes, this is all going to tie back in our eyes we have receptors, which we think about for vision, but they also have these other ones, they're called neuropsins. And these have nothing to do with vision, but they have everything to do with light. So when you go outside, whether it's sunny out or it's rainy out, it doesn't matter. When you go out in natural light, your eye picks up that information, and it has direct connections down into your microbiome. It also has direct connections to your pituitary and your pineal gland that secretes melatonin. It has connections throughout your whole nervous system. So when you go out and get light, it's actually communicating to your gut bacteria what to do. And about 3 years ago, there was these scientists, and they got the Nobel Prize for discovering something called the clock gene. So it's this gene in our body that every single cell in our body has this thing called the clock gene. And it's really cool. If you YouTube it, you can see they can take the pancreas, and if they have someone go outside and get natural light, you will see these clock genes turning on and off in your pancreas, going like this. If you want to look at your heart tissue, you can see all of these cells, and it's all linked to light. So I would tell people, if you want to increase your immune system, help your microbiome, and stay healthy, I have a really simple kind of little way to do this. Now, if we lived outside, 12 hours a day, that would be great. None of us are going to do that. But what you can do in the morning is go out for 5 minutes at a minimum. If you just go outside for 5 minutes, the studies show that your body will sync itself to whatever light is outside. They think 5 minutes, but they say most Americans spend 97% of their time indoors. And I'd say that's pretty much true for most of us, right? And if you think about even that time outside is considered being in your car with the windows up. So really, we don't get outside. So that's why I said my number one prescription is go outside. That is literally, I'll write it down and say, in the morning, go out for 5 or 10 minutes. It could be in your backyard. It could be out in your driveway. When I was driving up here, not on the freeway, but on the surface streets, I wind my window down and I crank on the heat, even in the winter, because you're still going to get natural light. And then I went for a run this morning at a park. So I've already got about 45 or 50 minutes of light. Some days I don't have that much time, but I'll always try to go out. Instead of smoking a cigarette, I say go out and take your light break. And that's literally going out for 5 or 10 minutes, and then at noon try to go out for 5 or 10 minutes, and then in the afternoon go out for 5 or 10 minutes. And studies have shown even that little bit is all of a sudden your clock genes are syncing yourself to Earth, and they actually see what's happening. And they know when this clock gene is also stimulated, it has direct receptors to your thymus gland, which produces a lot of the cells that you need for immune system, and they can actually show without trying to get too complicated, but you have different parts of your immune system. One is called like Th1, the other is called Th2. So when you're getting the flu, certain of these are elevated, some come down, some come up later. That clock gene ties exactly 100% into that part of the immune system. So the first thing I would suggest is going outside every day. And even if it's crummy weather and it's pouring rain, the reason why you want to go outside is because your body wants to know what's happening. So if it's cold out and it's rainy, it's going to tell your system like, hey, look, there's no ultraviolet light out today. This is not really great weather. And it's going to actually change how your immune system is reacting to the environment. And so I think that's part of the reason with the flu season, when you see it, in the wintertime, is because literally we're not going outside. And granted, we don't have as much light, but just doing that little simple thing can do a lot for your microbiome in the gut and for your own health and immune system. And then the other thing is, one of my favorite vitamins during the winter is vitamin A. And so there's 20 things I could think of, but I thought today there was just a couple that I wanted to share with you that are really simple. And vitamin A is really interesting because you don't see it, kind of put out there like, hey, vitamin A is really good. Let's kind of focus just on vaccines for malaria, for this disease and that disease. It's not a comment on whether a vaccine is good or bad. But the interesting thing is this is such a cheap way. They know that in most of Africa and in other underdeveloped countries, when kids have had measles, malaria, and other diseases, if they just gave them 200,000 IUs of vitamin A, and I'll explain a little bit of that, but 200,000 IUs of vitamin A in just one dose, they could decrease the measles mortality rate by 35%. And that was just one dose. So then they started looking, and they went to some other countries, and they said, well, what if we give them 200,000 IUs and maybe give it to them twice a year? And what happens? So they found out the mortality rate from malaria dropped around 35 to 50%. And they found that in what's called all-cause mortality, which means how quickly, all-cause mortality is what they're going to die of no matter what. They found about a 50% reduction. So vitamin A is great, and it's just pennies. It costs nothing. And so for much of the underdeveloped world, just giving kids some vitamin A would drastically change a lot of the outcomes. But they know that even in the Western world and here in the United States, 50% of the people don't even meet the RDA, which is like the basic minimum, right, we need to have just so we don't have a severe vitamin A deficiency. That 50% of the population is deficient in that vitamin A. So during the flu season or winter season, our vitamin A drops because whenever we're introduced to any kind of a virus or bacteria, the vitamin A always drops, so our actual reserves of vitamin A will drop. So my favorite thing to do is during the winter is to take about 5 to 10,000, depending on kind of your immune system, of vitamin A. And I like the vitamin A from fish oil, so it'll say vitamin A from fish oil or vitamin palmitate. And you can buy these in any store for just pennies. And if you do that throughout the winter, I think it's going to really help. And the one thing that we do when somebody comes in with a pretty severe viral infection, we actually recommend a very high dose of 100,000 IUs 3 times a day for about 3 days. So this is a really high dose. I recognize that. This will be very controversial. But you have to understand, when you have a viral infection, so if you're getting really sick, you don't want to take that just on a daily basis. But if you're actually really getting sick, the way a virus works is it enters your cell and it replicates itself inside the cell. That's how it lives. It's different than a bacteria. So the only way it can live is by replicating itself. And vitamin A goes in there and it actually stops that virus from replicating, and they know that. Vitamin A also is located in your lungs, your intestines. There's a lot of vitamin A in there, and when you have an infection happening, it actually signals to different immunological pathways to come in, and it actually kind of tags that virus, and it says, hey, look, this is an antigen that's not supposed to be here, so it helps with that antigen kind of antibody response. So vitamin A is a great thing to do. Again, that's 100,000 3 times a day. I'm just going to warn you, if you Google that, they'll tell you don't take this, it's a toxic dose. And yes, it is if you do it for prolonged, but I often find for the first 3 days, and then you just stop it after that, that will definitely stop the virus. That's not a guarantee. I'm not saying that you'll never get sick or that's going to stop a virus, but I've been doing that for 25 years, and I've seen it help a tremendous amount. And then the other thing that I would recommend is our mushroom extracts, and maybe a lot of you already use that. There's a great one that I love. It's right down in Olympia in Washington. His name is Paul Stammet, and he grows mushrooms there. He's probably like the main mycologist in the whole world right now. And he makes these mushrooms, and it's very cool because he grows them right in Olympia. They're not grown in a lab or anywhere else. And he extracts the mushroom extracts, and he has some different formulas for them. And you can just go to his website. They're called My Community. And so they have capsules, or you can get like a tincture form, a liquid form. And generally recommend like 1 or 2 capsules or 1 or 2 kind of squeezefuls a day of that mushroom extract. But mushrooms are great. So he has some that have like turkey tail, shiitake, reishi. They have these blends of these mushrooms. And those are just wonderful to support your immune system during the winter. And then the last one is vitamin C. And so vitamin C, it depends on each person. Again, this is just sort of general information. But vitamin C taken like probably 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams once or twice a day is going to generally help your immune system. If you get sick, I actually recommend a certain kind of vitamin C, and it's called a liposomal. So it's spelled Liposomal, and it's a vitamin C. And you can buy this online. There's a company called Livon, Livon. There's other companies that sell liposomal vitamin C, but it's actually attached to a fat. So when you take that, what it does, and I'd only take this if you're sick because it's more expensive, but if you start to get sick, you can quadruple the dose, generally what it says on the box or the bottle, and you'll never overdose on this. The advantage of it is that it actually gets into the cell a lot quicker than regular vitamin C, and it doesn't give you like loose stools or a stomach upset. And they've kind of compared it to, I don't know if anybody's heard of intravenous vitamin C, which is something much more amped up than that, but the liposomal is pretty equivalent to that. It's not the same thing, but it can really help in the case of having the flu or a virus. So those are my top 3 recommendations I love for just kind of staying healthy for any kind of virus or whatever. The other thing, just things that you can do on your own, I mentioned about going outside, that would be the very, very first thing. The other thing that is, if you get a fever, now this would not be the case for someone if they're very, very old, they've got some kind of debilitating disease, but for almost anybody else, fever is good. So we're always taking anti-fever medication, but if you can actually induce a fever if you're sick, it works great. About 3 weeks ago, I woke up at 2:45 in the morning. I was extremely sick. I won't go into all the things I was experiencing, all right? But it wasn't pretty. And I had a high fever. I still had to go to work that day, not seeing patients, but I had to do some other things. I had to work the day, and I just was miserable. I mean, I had a fever. My wife looked, she goes, I don't even know how you're going to work. And I've been doing this for years. We did it with our kids. It's called a fever treatment, and what it basically happens about 5 p.m. or as before you're getting ready to go to bed because you're probably not feeling very well, is you hop in the bathtub, and you want to get as hot as you can without scalding yourself. You can put a little cool rag on your forehead, and you want to sit in there for about 20 minutes and drink some ginger tea. And then after that, what you do is you dry yourself off, and you crawl into bed with sweats and 5 blankets on you. And you will end up by sweating the whole night, and you'll raise a fever. The advantage is you're asleep. So you don't even really you don't have to experience that high fever. And the next morning I got up at 4:15 when I normally get up, and I went and worked a 14-hour day. And we have people say this almost all the time because we're so afraid of fever. Now again, if you have like a really serious illness or something else happening, you might want to think about that. But for any person who's just in general health, because what fever does is it actually gets rid of the infection. So that's why you start getting that thing coming on. And so every time people get up to 100, maybe 100.5, we go, oh my gosh, I've got a fever, let's take Tylenol or something else. If you let that fever just run its course, that's your body's own mechanism of actually trying to get rid of the infection. So that's a great way. It is on our website also. It's seattlenaturalhealth.com, not giving a plug. But if you want to look on there, it actually has the fever treatment spelled out for you if you're interested in doing that. The other one is also hydration. So that is so important. If you think about, so if someone's in a assisted living or if they're in a critical care unit, if they're older and these are the people who are dying, what are the things, I'm sure everybody's cared for an aging parent or a friend or something. What happens is, what's the number one thing? They're all dehydrated. I mean, everyone is, I've tried to tell my parents, it's like drink water, and they just won't drink water, right? So they're all extremely dehydrated. You can see it on their lab test. You can see it on everything else that's dehydrated. So you got to drink water, and that's so important. So the water I'd recommend is there's a couple ways to get around this. I would always recommend drinking spring water if you can. I don't know how many people live around Lynnwood, but I'm addicted to the spring on 164th Avenue. I'm probably sure of you did it, so I've been going there for like, I don't know how many years. I bring my 30 gallons of water containers and I fill them up. And I love going there because it's like you meet people from all over the world, right? I mean, it's like it's an international scene. Everybody's there to get their water. It's kind of a very cool kind of spiritual experience. I like going. But that's the water I'd recommend, or you can buy it in a store like Crystal Springs, or maybe buying those 5-gallon things. That's really good. If you're going to drink just from your tap, I'd always recommend getting a filter that takes out fluoride. So there's a really good water filter. It's called Zero Water. You can just buy that at Bed Bath & Beyond, Amazon. It's like $30. It's just a little one you can put on your counter. I know fluoride is a somewhat controversial thing, whether they really need it or not. But the thing about fluoride is, I was talking to you about water, how important it is. Well, your water has a charge on it. It has kind of like a positive and a negative charge, and that makes water so electrical. That's the advantage of it. So it's like a battery, because it's a positive and a negative. What fluoride does is it comes in and it takes the charge away from water. So I've actually seen, okay, I got to stand up. I'm sorry, I've been sitting too long. Okay, I got to stand up. This is where I get too excited. But we have this machine. I can't remember if you've seen it, but it's called a bioimpedance machine, and it measures what's called your intracellular water and your extracellular water. So the extracellular water is about a third of your water you want in your body. And that's if you sprain your ankle, you see your ankle swell up, that's extracellular. But what you really want is the intracellular water, and that's the other two-thirds. And that's what's inside of your cell, and that's where your DNA is, your protein. That's when you have an immune response that goes into the cell, and you have all these things that happen inside the cell that says, here's our immune response. But if I've done on this test, so on this test that we do, people stand on it, it takes maybe like about a minute or two, it actually tells you how much intra and extracellular water you have. And based on that, I can tell you how healthy someone is just by looking at their water. And when you see going too much to that extracellular and not enough that intracellular, I guarantee you there's another measurement within that test that will tell you how healthy they are, but it's based on that water level. So the reason why you don't want to drink the fluoridated water, because that fluoridated water actually, you said, takes the charge off of the water, which means that it takes the charge off of your cell. And so I'll actually see on a test, it's a very objective measurement. They use this in hospitals in kidney disease, for cancer, that when you take that fluoride out of the water, you'll actually see the change between that intra and extracellular water. It's really fascinating. And there's a lot of other things that will also help increase that intracellular water. And so one of the other things I like to maintain your immune system is exercise. So I know everybody says that, but it's true. You got to get out and move. And unless you move, you're not going to produce that kind of movement, and you'll actually change. We did this very cool study. It's about 2 months ago. We took this machine, and we took it to a rowing team. What is that club just down off of Montlake? I can't remember the name of it, but there's a rowing club down there. We took 20 guys who were on this rowing team, and we measured their intra and extracellular water before exercise. They went and rowed for an hour. They came back, and every single person, with the exception of one person, showed that their intracellular water went up and their extracellular water went down, just with just going out and rowing. And that in itself just lowered their risk for all sorts of different kinds of diseases and for infection. So exercise is so important. So I know we know that, but it's like you will actually see objective changes by doing that. And the last thing, I don't know, I could keep going. I don't know if I want to take questions pretty soon or... Okay, just give me any feedback. The other one I love is a breathing exercise. And so everybody has their way they have to do a meditation, so I'm not saying mine is the one and only way, but if you're looking at kind of with this virus thing going on, what I like to do in the morning is I lie on my back, and some of you have probably heard this, is called a 4-4-8 breathing. Basically, breathe in through your nose for 4, hold for 4, and breathe out for 8 seconds. And so you can do whatever you want. I said this is not the only way for breathing. There's so many different ways for there. I like this one because I have like 5 minutes to do this in the morning. This is my morning meditation and my breathing. But especially during the flu season, when you breathe out for that 8 count, you want to breathe out as fast, as hard as you can, so you end up by coughing. So we won't do that here, all right? I won't practice that here, but at home you can do it. Or I just actually do it wherever you are. And when you breathe out like that, it kind of clears that what I call the dead air from your lungs. And so when you start coughing like that, it actually is a way to kind of bring your lung and to bring new oxygen into the tissues of your lungs. So I think it's a great way. What I do during that time also is I picture light absorbing my body. I feel my body full of light, and it's emitting light, and I see all of my cells. Remember I said how we all communicate, our body communicates through light? That's what I picture. And that's just like a 5-minute exercise, that's all. But I find if you do that every morning, I think it will dramatically help our immune system too, to function a lot better. So I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I don't know if we want to open up the questions or we can do some other tangent or...
What food do you recommend for getting vitamin A?
Oh, okay, yeah. So they heard that right? Okay, so the food for vitamin A, well, so I should back up for a second. Yeah, so I should back up. Thank you for that question because I should have clarified that. I'm sorry I didn't do it with vitamin A. The reason why I said you want to get it from, try to get vitamin A from a fish oil, so you want it from an animal source. The reason why is because if you're taking it just from like a vegetarian source, like carrots, yellow squash, are really high in all these carotenoids, which actually are really good for you. That's not the point. The point is that that is not vitamin A. That's beta carotene, and that has to be converted into vitamin A. And so they're two different things. And most people, if you have any thyroid condition, if you have any kind of other health thing, it takes a fair amount of energy in your body to convert that into the vitamin A. And so the reason why I like taking the vitamin A from an animal source is that it's already in the form that your body uses. And the best form, and the reason why I'm going to say everybody to take vitamin A, because the best form is liver. So, yeah, I know. That's what I was going to say. I try to tell people, so my own thing is I eat some organ meat, right? But it kind of grosses everybody out. But I'll at least eat liver like once a week. But most people are not going to do that. They just don't eat organ meat. So when I grew up eating liver once a week, my mom would make it. Well, vitamin A, liver, I know I'm not going to convince anybody to eat liver, all right? But liver is like really from a grass-fed animal, not from by a QFC or something. From a grass-fed animal is probably like one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. But we're not going to do that. You can if you did that, that's great. You don't need to eat an 8-pound liver. Just 3 ounces, like 3 or 4 ounces a week, or every couple of weeks is all you really need.
You smother it with onions.
Right. So you could, the way to cook it, you could smother with onions or however you want to do it. Yeah, bacon, that's why my mom used to cook it, lots of ketchup and onions and everything else. But so that's the thing is, humans, for as long as we lived on the face of the earth, have eaten organ meats. You ever watch those National Geographic things? You see a tiger take down a yak or a elk, whatever the animal is. What is the first thing they eat? The heart or the liver. Like the muscle is actually usually the last thing they'll ever eat out of an animal. And so, if you remember that old Kevin Costner movie from, what was it called when he was, what's that? Yeah, Dances with Wolves, right? They shoot the buffalo, and what's the first thing they give him was, I think it was the heart or the liver. Yeah, the liver. Yeah, that's a good move. That just shows you that's how humans have lived forever. So I'm not advocating everybody go out and start eating, kidney and heart. You can, that's great. But you probably won't do that. But that's why I recommended getting the vitamin A from an animal source, because that's actually where it has it. The next thing would be fish. Fish is a good source of vitamin A, egg yolks, and butter. But it's kind of like all the things that we've told, don't eat this because it's high in fat. But that's actually where the vitamin A is found. What's that?
Egg yolks.
Yeah, egg yolks are a good source too.
I had just one other question. My other question was just where do you rank walking in terms of getting us our exercise?
Walking?
Yeah.
Well, I think walking, especially if you're outside, is great. So as far as the exercise go, all the studies, obviously there's very few that would ever contradict this. The studies that show if you do a high-intensity exercise once a week is equivalent to like walking on a treadmill for a couple of hours. So the high intensity means that you're doing an activity as hard as you possibly can for 30 to 60 seconds, resting for 30 to 60 seconds, and then doing that 5 more times. And so they've done in just these little teeny things, which that's like 11 minutes. It's nothing. And you go like, well, that's so crazy. How can that, why is that? How would that even help our immune system? Or how does that make us function better? So I'll just explain this very quickly. You have 3 types of muscle fibers. You have a slow, a moderate, and a fast twitch. So the slow is you're on the treadmill, you just kind of, it's great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you're kind of you're accessing what are called these slow twitch. That's like running a marathon, you're doing a nice walk, which is great. But you need to kind of get to these other called these type 2 and type 3 fast twitch. That's the one, a tiger comes to you and you're fighting the tiger. So it's like everything in your body is like on a level 10, right? I mean, it's way up there. Or you're hiking and you're slipping and you're trying to keep yourself from falling. Like, 200 years ago, probably these were things that we may have encountered in our life, right? But we don't really encounter that anymore. And so when you do an exercise like that, that's what it's mimicking, and it goes to those fast twitch fibers. And what it does is it pulls all of that blood sugar out of your muscles. It actually sends to all the different systems of your body to make more hormones. It tells your immune system it does all these things to function at a much higher level because it thinks that you're kind of at this pretty big threat. And so the advantage of that is that you'll build more muscle, you're going to actually increase that intracellular water, and you're going to get a much longer health effect from doing that. Because what happens when you're exercising that hard, your body can't possibly produce enough energy from that. Because your mitochondria, which is what we talked about, kind of what powers your body, says, I can only take so much of this energy that you're doing from this exercise. So it says, I'm going to recycle this, I'm going to put it back into my liver, and then when I can handle some more of this, I'm going to start releasing some more of this energy from my liver to keep your mitochondria, keep your energy working. So the advantage of it, when you do that high workout, your body is going to think that you're still doing that exercise for the next 2 days. So the advantage of that, again, if you're doing like just a walk, if you're just walking, which is great, your body's you're not going to access those muscles. When you access those muscles, your body's still going to think you're exercising like that for 2-3 days. So you're going to burn more calories, you're going to get more muscle, your brain is going to be more alert. And the reason why I like that exercise is because it's 10 to 15 minutes, that's it. But, for everybody it's going to be really different. I tell people, like, if you like to get on an exercise bike, do it on an exercise bike. If you're walking, if you can find a steep hill, then just go up a steep hill. If you're swimming, you're on a treadmill, weights are really great. Weights are a really good idea to do that too. So you just have to kind of find out what works for you. If you're interested, you can go onto YouTube, and it's called high intensity interval training or something like that. But if you YouTube it, they have things for like people who are in their 80s. How do you do a high intensity exercise to a 20-year-old guy, who's trying to play, NFL football. So it's this whole variation. So you just have to figure out kind of what works for you. But again, it's just like a 30 to 60 second, pretty hard, as hard as you can. Rest for 30 to 60, and do that 5 more times, and that's your workout. And do that once a week, helps your body tremendously. Yeah.
There is an online question from Terry about vitamin A, and if you're a vegan, how would that work?
Right. So if you're a vegan, then the only way to do it would be you have to take vitamin A from an animal source. So as a vegan, all I could tell you is that I'm not sure what to tell you. I mean, I'm not telling someone should be a vegan or not a vegan. I'm just saying that you could try to increase more beta carotene. I would suggest if you're going to take beta carotene, at least try to take it with some kind of a fat. So maybe that's coconut oil or avocado oil. You want that beta carotene to be attached to they were showing some studies, if you take it with fat, you're going to convert that beta carotene into a form of vitamin A. Also, palm oil is much easier to convert into that vitamin A also. So if you're looking for a vegan source, palm oil would be another good one. Okay.
Meredith would like to know, what are the best fermented vegetables to eat?
Oh, I could go on that. So I have my favorite. I make my own, but I'll also buy it. My favorite is just sauerkraut. But you can buy it with, carrots, pickles, beets, kimchi. Kimchi is a little harder for some people to take. You don't want to eat that and then go to work. It's very spicy, but anyone is fine. There's a whole bunch. If you go to Whole Foods or PCC, even QFC now has a whole shelf of all this stuff. So I just experiment with it. And people think, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to eat like a whole jar of this? You need like 2 tablespoons a day. It's just a condiment. You don't have to like be sucking down cups of that's a lot of fermented vegetables to eat. So that's a great one I like any kind there.
And don't heat it.
Don't heat it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, don't heat it.
I grew up with grandparents who cooked sauerkraut and sausage and all
Yeah.
I had 2 questions. What could you talk about vitamin D and levels to take?
Okay.
And then the second question is about chlorine in the water, if that does the same thing as fluoride.
Okay.
does.
So with vitamin D, I would take, that's a good question. With vitamin D, I would probably recommend about 5,000, which is kind of what you read more or less kind of everywhere, like 2 to 5,000. It really depends on your diet. But the vitamin D, I'd recommend 2 to 5,000 milligrams or IUs a day. And I would just leave it at that. That's good. I would just take the vitamin D. The other thing that I like to take along with that, which really makes a big difference, is vitamin K2. And yeah, probably a lot of you have heard about that. Again, vitamin K2 basically exists traditionally because we would get it from fermented soybeans, which is called natto. And if any of you have ever had that, you'll probably never eat it again. I think I'm the only person I know who will eat it. Someone else eats it? Okay, yeah. Right. That's what I said. Usually people try it once and they think they're eating mucus. It's kind of, yeah, it looks pretty disgusting. What's that?
Great sales.
Oh yeah, great. I know. But I said I'll put it in with sardines and put a bunch of mustard on it and everything else. So you don't take a teaspoon of it and just eat. I've never known anybody who could just do that. And then the other one is through, again, it's kind of like through organ meats, you find vitamin K2. You find it in egg yolks, but you find vitamin K2 in a lot of organ meats. And again, traditionally, that's where humans have always got it. But,
Can you tell me?
I'll repeat the question.
I've read both things. I now take my vitamin K2 and my vitamin D separately because I read that something that was better. Do you know?
So the question is, should you take vitamin D and K2 together or separately? So I don't make this complicated. So you can take them together. That's easy. It doesn't make any difference because they work synergistically, and they also work with vitamin A. So really, if you want to take vitamin A, the best thing is to take some vitamin D, some vitamin A, and K2. The only thing I'll just tell you is vitamin K2 is broken down into two different forms. So there's one called MK4, and the other is called MK7. So if this is like getting way too I don't really care that much about it, it's fine. But just if you're going to buy it, my suggestion is you buy it, if you can, with called MK7. The only reason why is because it's going to last a lot longer in your body. So the MK4 is very short-lived, it's only a few hours, and MK7 will last like a whole day. So that's what I was saying. If you're taking the MK7, you don't necessarily need to take them together. Yeah, so it doesn't mean don't take MK4, but if you want to do that, if you're not sure, just go buy vitamin K2. Okay, they're going to usually will have both forms of it in there. But if you're not really sure, at least ask for MK7, because that's going to be the most kind of active in your body. And again, if you're eating egg yolks, that's a really good form of vitamin K2 and butter, and different things like that. All the things we're not supposed to be eating, right? So, yeah. And then I know it was about the vitamin D and chlorine in the water. So, I'd say I don't meet too many people who drink tap water still, but if you do, Seattle actually, the Seattle area has some of the best water in the United States, I think. I think it tastes really good, but you don't want the chlorine in it. So any Brita filter will take out the chlorine, and the chlorine, what it does is it messes with our gut bacteria. So if you think about it, it disinfects water from bacteria, but if we're drinking it, what is it going to do to us? It's going to disinfect our bacteria as well. So that's why I was going to suggest the zero filter, but any of those little teeny filters you put on your sink, those would work really well. So you don't have to, you can go spend $3,000 on a water filtration system, but to be real honest with you, I think if you just get this zero water filter for like $30 and you just pour your water through it, I think that works really well. But yeah, the chlorine will definitely affect our gut bacteria. I don't know if there's any other questions or...
Dr. Ramaley?
Yes.
Put it on your microphone.
Hi, I've been hearing you talk about taking vitamin K, 2, and A, and D. And do you advocate food sources as better than synthetic sources or a combination?
Okay. That's funny. I just looked at my notes. I had a feeling I was forgetting something, and there it was. It's food sources, but I meant to talk about cod liver oil, because if you're vegan, that's not going to be the best option. But if you're willing to take a little cod liver oil, so my parents told me when they were growing up that I don't know about any of your parents if you had it when you were growing up, but mom would come around with a tablespoon of cod liver oil, and every kid would take it, and this is what they did. They all hated it. Now we have brands that take out all that stuff, but they would just get good old Norwegian cod liver oil and just suck down a tablespoon. The reason why is because cod liver oil contains vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K2. I mean, it contains all that stuff. So I think cod liver oil is kind of like, that's so funny you mentioned it, because I was just looking on my paper on that. I knew I was forgetting something, but I love cod liver oil. I think it's a great way, so if people don't want to do all that, there's some good brands out there. Like there's Carlson's and some other ones. There is one that I like that you don't see in stores, but it's called Green Pastures. And you can buy that online. But Green Pastures, one reason I like about them is that they actually take a bunch of cod livers and they dump them in a big old barrel and they let them ferment. And they don't, they will clean them out. I mean, obviously they're filtering out a little bit, but they don't heat it, they don't pasteurize it, they don't do anything. And so you're getting the true source of that cod liver oil. And so when you ask about the food sources, it's a really good balance. And so Carlson's and many of the ones that you're going to see in any store, they take it out, they distill it, they do some other things, and they kind of add it back in. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but if you're looking at like the kind of pure like actual source of it would be Green Pastures, and they're the only one that does that. They're online. Yeah, you can. I don't see it in stores, but you can buy it online. And the guy I actually talked to him before. He does a really good job of making his cod liver oil. And I mentioned other sources. If you're a vegan, or as a vegetarian, you can get some butter, egg yolks, things like that. If they're eating that, as a vegan, it's a little bit harder. So I would just say, and some of those they really need some of those ones that are from animal. But I'm not trying to comment whether it's good or bad to be a vegan or vegetarian. Just those are some of the missing nutrients that they have, and it's really hard to get from a vegetarian source.
Lisa would like to know, do you have any thoughts about drinking aloe vera? And Nancy would like to know, does green tea make water okay?
Green tea? Yeah. Okay. Aloe vera. Aloe vera is great for if you're constipated, and it's a great, aloe vera is good for your colon. It actually helps kind of clean it out. It does some other things to help get rid of some of the kind of the bad bugs in our gut. I wasn't sure if they meant like just aloe vera. You can buy it like to drink. I don't know if they were saying that, but. Okay, drinking. Okay, so drinking. Yeah, I mean, I think you can buy it in the store. Aloe vera is great. Again, it's kind of like whatever, does that appeal to you or not? I think it's fine because it does do a lot of good stuff for our gut. I think it helps. And the question was with green tea with water, does green tea make water okay? Yeah, I would just say drinking green tea in general would be a good thing. You can like do green tea extracts. I'm not sure if it would change the water or not. To answer the question, I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. I don't know what our timeline is. I just want to look at it.
I guess my question is about all these different things. Are a lot of them like the vitamin K2 water soluble? Do we have to worry about overdose? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah. Okay. So the biggest one I would say, if you're worried about any of those, they're not a problem. The only one would be probably vitamin A and D. So that's why I was trying to keep it, with the vitamin A, I would do that just during the winter for the most part, probably starting from like October to May, something like that, kind of during the flu season. And again, like doing maybe like 3,000 to 5,000, maybe 5,000 IUs of vitamin A. I think at that level, you're totally safe. You're just a teeny bit above the RDA level for what they recommend. Because if you start taking too much of it, you can become toxic in it, but you have to do like really like massive doses. You have to be really doing a lot to get toxic in it. But I just want to reiterate, when you're doing those high doses for those 3 days, after those 3 days, you definitely don't want to be doing that high dose anymore. So I just want to make sure that's really clear. It's 3 days is the maximum. And if you're pregnant, then I wouldn't be taking that amount of vitamin A either. Just doing maybe like 3,000 to 5,000 a day while you're pregnant is fine, but you don't want to do those higher doses of the 300,000 if you're sick. The vitamin K2, you don't really become toxic because it's not a fat-soluble vitamin per se, so it doesn't really accumulate in your body. And the vitamin D theoretically could be, because that's a fat-soluble, meaning that all these things are basically stored in your liver. So if you started taking so much of it, then theoretically you could get too much, but I just rarely ever see that.
You know how articles come through on the email, and there's one about high-dose vitamin C they had used in China.
Oh, right.
For the COVID-19, and I don't know how you verify such a thing, but I've heard it in other cases for other diseases. Can you share anything about high dose
Sure.
for some?
Yeah. I didn't go into it because it's not something that most of us would have access to. But in China, they have, last time I looked, I think they have 13 sites in hospitals where they're doing IV vitamin C. And these are really well-designed studies. And what they're doing, IV vitamin C has been around for like 40 years. It's been around forever, but it never gains popularity because nobody makes money off of it. Sorry, that's my thing on Big Pharma. But no one can patent ascorbic acid. It's vitamin C. So IV vitamin C has been around for years. There's I can't remember his name right now. There's a medical doctor. I can't remember his name. Gosh, I know it. But I read his books, and so they've done that. They had these great studies back in the 50s with polio. This guy was taking kids with severe polio and giving IV vitamin C, and these people were having almost no consequences from the infection. But again, it didn't catch on because it wasn't necessarily a pharmaceutical approach. And so now what they've done is they know that vitamin C, because it was kind of more of an alternative thing, but now finally someone in a hospital decided, hey, maybe we should try vitamin C. This is about 2 years ago. I think it's called the MERIK, M-E-R-I-K protocol. So he's getting all this credit, which is kind of funny because it's been around forever, but that's okay. And what he's been doing is, I mentioned about this infection called sepsis of the blood. And the reason why people have more sepsis than they ever had before is because it's antibiotic resistant. So antibiotics are a wonderful drug. They're needed sometimes, and probably 34 years ago, when they gave antibiotics IV, it had a profound input. You could cure sepsis, and it was pretty amazing. But now the bacteria, like any virus, are going to figure out, okay, this isn't working. We're just going to change our genomic imprint. We're going to change our, shift things around. And so that's why people die of sepsis, because antibiotics don't work. So this one guy in the emergency room said, well, I'm going to start giving IV vitamin C. Like, what a novel idea. And he did it on 12 patients, and not a single one died. And that was his initial case study on these 12 people. And these are not people like, hey, I'm kind of sick. These are people like, okay, you're done. Like, you have less than 48 hours to live. And he did the IV vitamin C. And so it kind of relates back even to the coronavirus. Like, it's this fear of it, but what if we said, like these people who came in, I don't know whether that's going to help someone who has congestive heart failure, diabetes, COPD, then they COVID-19 and go in the hospital. I don't know whether IV vitamin C would change that, but they know in a lot of those studies, they find that those people were turned around. And so let me talk about one thing about the vitamin C. I forgot to mention, so this isn't that podcast, is that here's an interesting concept. We don't die of infections. We actually don't die of infection. We die of the inflammatory process. And that's not splitting hairs. It's like a huge divergence there, because when someone say, hey, you got Ebola, Ebola's going to kill. No, the Ebola doesn't kill you. That inflammatory process does. And that's what's called, it's called the cytokines. So cytokines are these inflammatory markers in our body. So whether you get strep and you look at your throat and it's all red, that's not actually strep. That's the toxin. That's that inflammatory process that you see in your throat. Someone has COVID-19, now they're like going into respiratory failure, their heart's not working. That's not because of the virus per se, it's because your body's having this inflammatory response. So the reason why this goes back even like to talking about going outside and all these other things is like, how do we lower inflammation in our body? So if we're already in a non-inflamed state, if we get sick, our bodies are going to do that much better. But that's how IV vitamin C works. It doesn't stop by stopping the infection. I mean, it could do that. That's part of it. But what it does is, we've all heard of antioxidants, like, hey, let's take antioxidants, whatever it is, it's a good idea. But vitamin C, it has this electrical charge on it. And what that does is it works as an antioxidant. So when you're doing IV vitamin C, all you're doing is you're loading your body full of these electrons, which actually help bring down that inflammatory response. So that's why it works in sepsis. Because when someone has an infection in the blood, you're not going to like kill that bacteria. I mean, it's in your blood, it's going around. All you can do is kind of keep that inflammatory process down. And so that's what IV vitamin C does. And I honestly think that if we started running that when people going with the COVID-19 or the influenza A or B or whatever, if they started doing IV vitamin C, we'd see that death rate drop dramatically. And that's what they're finding. And I don't know the details of that, but I looked at from someone who helped design that study. He was actually a Chinese doctor from Harvard, I think. And he's the one who's implementing these in China, and he already started to produce this information. But we don't see on the front page of the news, do we? It's going to be a COVID-19 vaccine, but it's not about IV vitamin C.
So I have a question about that, since this is.
Linda, will you put it here?
I've read about this previously as well. So you would have confidence in doing that. Can you, as a naturopathic physician, order that and have people here in our area be able to access that intervention?
Yeah. I don't do it personally, although I think I've been thinking about doing it. But there's a really good naturopath right here in Lynnwood, Brendan. Oh God, dang it! I remember his name. I should know. Brendan Cochran. It's called. Do you know who that is? It's a clinic right in Lynnwood or Edmonds. But if you just Google Brendan Cochran, and there's other naturopaths who do that. I just know that he teaches it, and that's something he does a lot of, as well as a lot of other IV therapy. That's too bad that it's not like you couldn't go into urgent care. I mean, it's great that he does that, and even if I did it, but why isn't that mainstream medicine? It's pennies. I mean, it's literally pennies to buy ascorbic acid and an IV, and you just sit there for an hour and monitor it. But again, it's not really like no one's going to make large amounts of money off that. Go ahead.
Were you complete?
Well, let me just say, so one last thing. I talked about going outside. This is the other thing I want to talk about. That I want to tell you as many free things as you can do, like just things you can do on your own. And when I thought about that inflammatory process, so the earth is a reservoir of these electrons. So think about an antioxidant as an electron. So in our cell, you have like what's called a positive charge and a negative charge. And it's more complicated than that, but just think the more negative charges you have, the better. And so the earth is a reservoir of these negative charges. They know that for a fact. And so one thing I also tell people to do is called grounding, which you may have been reading about, but is going barefoot on the ground. But if you can go barefoot on the ground, I tell people if you can do it at least 2 or 3 times a week for 5 or 10 minutes, the earth is literally a reservoir. If you go barefoot, you're going to get these electrons going up into your system, which is an anti-inflammatory. So in my book, I talk about in my right calf many years ago, I was running and I went into a hole and I almost completely ruptured my Achilles tendon and my gastroc and a bunch of these other ones, and my whole leg was just shredded down there. So I got the MRI the next day, and the guy goes, it was a radiologist I knew, and he goes, yeah, there's just no way you're going to just see this thing just become inflamed, and it'll turn, which I've seen in other people too, and it turns blue and everything else. Well, so granted, I did a bunch of other things. I was taking a bunch of enzymes. I was doing a lot of vitamin C. I was doing all those things, but I'm on crutches. I got down to the park the next day, and it was like a dog. I just put my leg on the ground. I sat there for like 3 hours. And every day I would go to the park and just put my leg on the ground or into the backyard. And literally the earth is emitting these electrons, so it's like this anti-inflammatory effect. So I know this isn't Florida or California to go barefoot all the time, but literally if you can just go like 5 minutes, if you have a backyard, I find some parks, even if you just go for a few minutes, a few times a week, you really get the benefit of that grounding, and it's free. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything, right? And it's a really good thing to do for your body. So,
There was one more question from Terry about all of the vitamin recommendations. Is there a peer-reviewed scientific research that supports these recommendations? If so, is it referenced anywhere?
Yes, the one's in vitamin AR. I can get that to one. I think it was the Journal of Virology. The other one is the American Academy of Pediatrics that recommends vitamin C. And they quoted this study from the measles. I mean, if someone wants to, they can try to, they can email me at like info@seattlenaturalhealth.com, and I can try to give them those things. So everything I've talked about are all refereed journal, tier 1, tier 2 journals. And if someone really wants it, I'll be glad to get it. And I will try to delineate when, if it's just everything's an opinion, right? But if something is just like, this is what I see anecdotally, then I want to make sure it's clear that it's just like, this is what I see anecdotally, and it's not. But everything I've said so far has been in the research.
Segue on that. To get back to that question for Terry, there's a really good website online. It's called examine.com, and it lists all the peer-reviewed literature, dosing recommendations, and it's really, really well done. So if anyone's looking for one single source, especially for the classic vitamins, that's going to be a good resource, and it'll save you a lot of emailing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Well, this is a recent item that's come through the email, and I thought it was so good. I sent it to a lot of people, and people thanked me, and then some said, oh, that's been debunked, and it's about a self-check that you breathe in fresh air, hold it for 10 seconds. For the COVID-19, if you can hold your breath for 10 seconds without coughing or, shortness of breath, that's an early self-check. And I don't know, it's so new out there, I don't know if there's any answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that, and it sounded, but I don't know. I actually Googled that and tried to search for that, and I didn't. So that's why I didn't mention that, because I just don't want to say. The other thing is, not to get political here, but it's interesting if you've noticed that, I don't know if this will get cut off, but Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, I'm already in trouble, signed a huge contract for billions of dollars with Big Pharma. And it's really interesting. I've been doing this for 25 years. So 10 years ago, if you just Google, hey, side effect of a statin, or hey, is there a side effect to taking amoxicillin? This isn't like radical stuff, or hey, should I be taking a beta blocker? You'd get really good information. It was pretty cool. You get a good variety of information, things like that. I could just go through example, like, hey, what do I do for low back pain? If you search it on your Google now, like if you put side effect of a statin, if you do this, you're going to see 10 things that show up are all Big Pharma. Now, you have to search through each one of those. One is called Healthline, one is 1MD, one is a Mayo Clinic. It's all being funded by Big Pharma. I just hate, I'm not trying to get political, but I'm just saying, someone asked about the resources. If you're going to Google the side effects of statins, right? Statins can be very good, so it's not a criticism of statins, but if someone wants to say, hey, I really want to know, you will not find that. You will not find it if you Google search it. They're going to say, yeah, side effects could be good, but hey, they're really not all that bad. So they've gotten really good at kind of like doing this sort of halfway thing. So if you really want to know what I've done, and it's totally opened up a whole new search engine, and I get paid for this, nothing, but you go to a search engine called Brave, B-R-A-V-E. I'm not advocating them or anything. I'm just saying, when I did this, you get a whole different perspective on different things. And then when you download that, and then if you do another search, and you can use what's called DuckDuckGo, which maybe some of you have read about. But if you do it through the Brave, you can do side by side. Go to Google and say side effects of statins, go to Brave and say side effects of statins under Brave, and you're going to get two totally different responses. And I'm not advocating Brave. I'm not saying Brave is any more accurate than anybody else. I'm just saying it's not going through a big pharma AI kind of thing. And so you'll get some really good information. They'll have some information saying, hey, here's some good benefits of statins, right? So I'm not trying to say it's all like, against corporations or anything. You're just getting, I think, a much more legitimate kind of non-biased view, because it's not going through, it's an open source. So anyway, that was just that question about finding vitamin A, because if you just Google that, you're going to find the first 10 are saying if you take vitamin A, you're going to have a deformed baby. So.
Are you familiar with Green Med?
Yes. So someone said about Green Med info. They're a really good website also. Sayer G is the guy who runs it. It's all refereed medical journal articles that basically put it into kind of a source where you can look up anything on there and find good information about, if you want to know about like a drug or about exercise or about anything else, but it's all from refereed medical journals. So he does a really good, I think he does a great job of giving good information out. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I was just going to say, will you talk about emotional components with things?
Yeah. So the question was, I talk about emotional components. Are we doing okay on time? Because I don't.
As far as I know.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going. That's fine. So emotional components, yeah, it's huge, right? And so that's why I was talking about, how far do we go with this COVID-19 thing, right? So I had someone came in the other day, and she said, I work with kids who are autistic. And so the mother, and he's blind in one, I should change the story. Right? Well, so he's blind in one eye because he hits himself. And then the mother was so freaked out by COVID-19, the kid picked up on her fear and started hitting himself again and went blind in the other eye. Now, I'm not blaming his blindness on COVID-19 and what's going on. I'm just saying is that her fear level got transmitted to the kid. And so, again, I want to make it clear, I'm not blaming COVID-19. I'm just saying it's this general, like you mentioned, about emotional stuff. I mean, it's just really weird. It's like you go into a store and it's like everybody's just like looking at each other. And so I think emotions, so the whole thing through all this is that we're not going to, I had someone said, it was here we are in a church, right? Someone wanted to go to their church meeting to a Bible study and said, well, I can't go because, we're all shut down. It's like, well, how much benefit does someone get to going to a Bible study or to whatever it is that you do for a spiritual thing or for fun or for laughter, and we don't do? It's like, I know if I'm cooped up for 2 or 3 days and I can't be with people, I start to go, I literally start to feel sick, right? And so I guess there's that whole other thing about the fear with this whole infection and the virus is I don't know what it's kind of doing to our own psyche. But I think if we don't live with the fear of the virus, and we actually focus on being healthy and that we've been resisting bacteria and viruses for thousands of years, and that's who we are. We are literally bacteria and viruses. So that's how I kind of look at it. And then I thought when someone loses their job, someone is home with their children for 6 weeks now, and they don't have daycare, and then they lose their job, now they don't have health care. There's just this whole ramification of the fear around all this stuff. And I guess all I can say is with my family and who we hang out with, it's look, we're being cautious, we're washing our hands, I'll wear gloves when we need to, we're washing everything down, but it's I don't know, do we live in fear or do we live in health? Do we say I think let's think about how much emphasis we've put on this. What if we flipped that around and said, we're going to focus on love? Really, it's crazy. What if we said, we're going to focus on the good things in the world that are happening instead of this whole kind of infectious things? Why don't we, Alzheimer's and autism will bankrupt Medicare by 2030. People don't realize that, but autism, someone just did a really good study. It's a PhD, and he did the economics of autism. And he said, no one's talking about it. He goes, this is going to outdo Alzheimer's. If we go on this path. So here we are spending all this energy on this thing out there that no one really knows about. But we know that autism is going to basically, it's going to almost literally bankrupt our country. And then if you put Alzheimer's on top of that, and then diabetes, so it's not to be all negative, it's just here's these other things out there that we know are going to happen. And wouldn't that be cool if we spent 6 weeks sitting there putting our energy into health? Why didn't we build more parks with all this money for kids to go to? Or that's just my ideas, but things that we do that were positive instead of kind of living in fear. So anyway.
What a wonderful note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can ask, people to spread the word of watch our focus.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I know you have books to sell, which will be donated to us. There's a little table if you wanted to put it there. And are you able to run the credit card for those who would like his book? It's well worth it. And it's a great gift, too, for those who maybe haven't been here or can't listen to this or, All right.
Yeah, but thank you very much. It's
Yeah.
great to be in this
Thank
church.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, and there will be fermented food class later in the year for health and wellness in the summer. And we're going to be going to farmers markets too, and I know you love that too, Dr.
Yeah, they're closed though.
Well, not in the, well,
No,
hopefully
but
not.
you're right. For the next 6 weeks, they're closed. But yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.